I want to start with you, Tabahn, right at the beginning point of your story here, and how you got into swimming. Can you take me back to when the sport was introduced to you?
Yes. I don't have one of those stories where most people like, oh, I almost drowned, or I just had this immense love for swimming. Growing up in Michigan, going to the beach is something that you just do in the summer, right? And my parents, being my parents, funny, like, none of them know how to swim. Both of them have no idea how to swim. They could drown in the shower if they needed to. But so of course my parents were like, hey, he's getting older. It's probably a good idea to put him in swim lessons so that, when he goes to the beach with his friends when he's older, he can take care of himself. He knows how to swim. Turns out that they actually signed me up for USA swim lessons. And the first time that I showed up to practice, I remember thinking to myself, here I am in my swim trunks, my beach trunks, and all these kids are wearing, jammers and Speedos, and they'll have these goggles. And back then it was the goggles with like the cool like bug antenna ones that came off to the side. I had snorkeling goggles, you know what I mean? So stuff like that. I was like, I don't like, this is so new to me. And I remember jumping in the pool, not knowing how to swim at all. I mean, I remember the first practice that I did. I was literally pulling the lane line, thinking like, when are they going to teach us how to swim? You know what I mean? And of course, I owe a lot of my successes to my parents. They pushed me beyond, what most people would consider normal, but they do what they have to do in order to, make sure that their kids are in the right spot and that they're great. From there, the rest is kind of history. I graduated my my swim class, and here my parents, Mark, we knew nothing about swimming. Like absolutely nothing about the sport of swimming. We didn't even know it was a sport. That being said, the end of the season comes
Were
around.
there any other siblings? Was it just you that was going through this
I was,
experiment?
yeah. For as of right now, it was just me. I know I do have a younger sister and a youngest brother who also are swimmers. My sister's swimming for the University of Chicago right now. My brother's in high school, so he's
But
just
you're the
starting
great
his.
experiment at the beginning
I
here.
was I was the pioneer, if you will. But yeah, so the end of the season rolls around, and of course, at the end of the season, you have your state meets, your conference meets, the big meet of the year. You know what I mean? The big meet of the season. And my parents and me, not knowing anything about swimming, said, "All right, this is like a graduation. Like they graduated, they know how to swim. The celebratory thing. All the kids are going to get together and they're going to race, for fun." Had no idea we were competing. I show up and I actually do really, really, really well. I don't remember, what my times were as that age. I was extremely young, but I remember thinking to myself, like, oh, I'm pretty good at this. And from there, the rest is history. I didn't stop doing it. I just, I went right through.
How old were you at this point in the story that you're telling?
I believe I think I want to say 5 or 6 years old.
Wow.
I was extremely,
Really
oh yeah.
early start.
I was very, very, very young, started very, very early. I mean, again, had absolutely no clue what we were doing.
So
So it
take me
is it
to
is quite a
the
miracle. Yeah.
so take me to the next step. Maybe past
Yeah.
that initial point, but like when is even like a state level competition introduced to you? When do you rise to the point where now you're competing maybe outside of
Yeah.
the Grand Rapids area?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't actually I won't I don't think I'll ever forget the moment when I realized like I looked at myself in the mirror and I was like, "Oh my gosh, like Tabahn, you can actually like do this. Like this is something that you can actually do. Like you can be good at this sport." Um I remember I believe I was 15 or 16 years old at the time. Still pretty young. I was still in high school. It was my state meet, winter state meet. So it was long course, right? Summer state meet, long course. And I remember we were going against. It was open. This is the first time that I had really been introduced to um, competing against people who were older than me. At the time, my coach was Don Kimble. Sadly, he passed away very recently. I love that man with all my heart and soul. He was one of the first people to actually truly believe and make me realize hey, this is something that you can do. He was right there with me in that come to face moment where I looked in the mirror. I'm like, I can actually do this. But regardless, I remember going to that state meet, and preliminaries, all I wanted to do was make podium. That's all I wanted to do. I'm like, man, like this is all I want to do. Just want to get that medal. And I remember, you know, I swam my heart out in the morning for 100 freestyle, swam my heart out in the morning, and I touched the wall. I sat by the results, and I came in 8th. And I was like, man, that's pretty good. I made it to the A final, but I'm there now. And one of the things that I think, you know, I personally enjoy about, you know, being myself is that, like, you know, and then I try to make it so that I can go further. I continue walking, you know what I mean? And so the step after that was like, okay, well, let's see how much damage we can do in this A final. And again, I was going against, I believe, kids from college who were home for the summer. This was the state meet. And I remember thinking to myself, like, I can actually do this. I ended up winning that 100 freestyle, going from 8th to 1st place. It was a tough swim. I do remember that. I remember being absolutely gassed at the end of it. I don't remember what my time was, but I know I was racing against a gentleman from GVSU at the time. I was going against a university kid, and after I hit the wall, I was on the podium. I mean, from that moment on, I was like, you know, I can definitely do this. I love this stuff. So.
But that's a big jump from, you know, like from learning to swim and kind of breaking through to a point where you really believe that, you know, we're talking, I think probably, you know, 7, 8, 9 years of development here for you to arrive at a place where you were really buying in. I'm interested to hear that. So was it, you know, did you have some setbacks or some points in between there where you really weren't so sure that you could be a swimmer?
100%. Any athlete who tells you that they don't second guess themselves throughout the entirety of their career is lying to your face. There's no way. Even from the young age that I started, you know, swimming is one of those sports where it's different. It is extremely grueling. It's time demanding, commitment. You have to make so many sacrifices. At a young age, you know, you tell people, I have practice at 5 o'clock in the morning. They look at you and they're like, you're 12, you're 13. You know what I mean? Like, why are you, like, you don't have time to be a kid, da 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 da. And at that young, impressionable age, you know, at one point, those words actually got to me. I thought to myself, like, am I missing out on something? You know what I mean? Like I don't have sleepover with my friends. I don't even really have that many friends except for people who are in the pool. You know what I mean? So I'm thinking to myself, like, am I missing out on something? And I remember, you know, I told my dad one time, I'm like, Dad, I don't want to swim anymore. And I believe I was in middle school at the time. I'm like, Dad, I don't want to do this anymore. Like, I want to experience whatever these people are telling me I'm missing out on. And my dad, he knew better. He knew, you know, he didn't force me to, you know, stay in a sport or whatever, but he was like, okay, you know, okay, it's your decision. And he gave it to me. And, you know, I remember for the first 2 months, Mark, I was having the time of my life. I mean, I didn't have to wake up early. I could come right home. I could get my homework done, eat dinner, go to bed. I made friends, the whole 9. I was experiencing it all. After the first 2 months, maybe 2 months and a half, I started to feel like something was missing. I started to feel like there was a piece of my identity that just wasn't there anymore. And that feeling is not something that I've ever since I've felt that at that young age, it's something that I've never wanted to feel again. And immediately I knew what was missing. It was swimming. It was the one thing that I knew I could be great at. And so, of course, I'm like, you know what, like, Dad, you were right. Sign me back up. Let's get into this. And it paid off. I mean, it paid off. I couldn't be more proud of where I ended up and what the things that I've accomplished while I swim. So.
Sure. So, you know, you paint that as kind of middle school years, and I'll kind of take you through some of these years. And, you know, I find your freshman to junior improvement in particular probably to be one of the most exciting ascensions of a swimmer of anybody that I've been researching here. And I'm really excited to get to those years and kind of hear about that from you. But, you know, you set a baseline as a freshman. uh, 21.8 in the 50, but a really good 100 where you were able to make the A final at your first high school state meet in 47.3, and kind of set a baseline of that you were going to be a championship finalist moving forward. And I don't know if anybody could have expected that your sophomore year would be such a jump forward. But let's talk about that freshman year. You're at Holland West, Ottawa. Right. So you get your career started here, and kind of tell me about assimilating into a high school program, and very good swimmer, who probably was at least one of the top. I don't see relays at that high school state meet, so I don't know if you were the only member of your team there, but certainly you were not there were not relays there. So I imagine, as you insert into the West Ottawa program, you're right near the top from the beginning. Tell me about that year.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, freshman year of high school, that was that was a while ago. But I do remember it quite vividly. I remember the whole hey, there are actually the idea that there were two separate entities of swimming. Do you know what I mean? There was your USA swimming that was the real deal for me. That was the business, got it locked down. That's where the things counted. That's where colleges were looking at, you know what I mean? And then also there was high school swimming. If I'm going to be completely honest with you, you know what I mean? High school swimming wasn't something that I was, I wasn't super serious about. It was something that I did, for fun. I of course, you know what I mean? I'm a competitor. I love to compete. I love to win. So I don't really have fun if I'm losing. You know what I mean? But high school the stakes were not nearly as high. While there were some USA swimmers who were in the same grade as me at other schools competing against our team, it wasn't anything that was oh my gosh, this is the make or break all. I remember high school being at least for me, a really fun, really relaxing, but also extremely rewarding point in my swimming career, especially freshman year, because at that point I realized okay, there is some sort of leeway in terms of the gruelingness of the sport. You know what I mean? But yeah, no, I did have fun. And like you said, when I qualified for the A final at state meet, I was oh, you know what, this is competing. This is there is a state meet. This is something that I can get myself into. And so, sophomore year, when that time came around, you lock down and you do what you have to do.
Yeah. And right from the very beginning of that sophomore meet, I see you go 20.3 on your medley relay, which I don't think you had probably moved in the water quite as quickly as that to that point in your career. And set a new bar for yourself. You went 21.14 in the 50. Which got you second place, and I think a pretty tight finish with a swimmer from Saline there. But I really like your 100, 45.55, almost a 2-second drop from the year before. Dip down into that new range. And again, the next year is going to be much bigger, and I think really kind of elevates you on the national stage. But this is a year, your sophomore year, where you emerge as probably one of the top 3 range, maybe top 4 range across all the state meets, swimmers, sprinters in the state of Michigan. So this is probably a really exciting year for you, especially as a competitor. Now you're really up there near the front.
Oh yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Yeah, no. One thing, one of the mottos that we have in our family when it comes to, swimming in particular, because that is a part of who we are as Afrik children, we swim. Priorities, school, swimming, friends, family fun, you know what I mean? All that stuff. But in terms of, kind of going back to what you're saying, you once you reach into that point of oh, I'm on the national level now, the pool opens up and it is a much bigger pond that you're swimming in. Do you know what I mean? Now it's not just people who are in the city over or who are in the state over. It's now people who are thousands of miles away that you have never heard of before, and all of a sudden you're seeing them at these national meets, and you're just like me. And then you realize, there are other people out there that are working just as hard, that are putting in the time, some even putting more time than you are. You know what I mean? So it's this is sports. You know what I mean? That's just the name of the game with sports. But yeah.
Yeah, so I would imagine based on those times that you swam at your sophomore state meet, that's probably kind of an unlocking opportunity to some next steps. I would
Absolutely.
imagine, as I see in your in some of your big meets, this is where NCSAs and junior appearances
Yeah.
start to open up in that upcoming year where
Yeah.
you're starting to qualify for new meets that are changing your perspective. I'm sure, I know that you swam your fastest 200 as a high schooler at a
Yes,
junior
sir.
national meet. So clearly you're starting to have to prioritize different meets.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, aside from just, as you said already, high school was not your number one priority. And so in some cases, you're really looking to be great in December, and in other cases, maybe in later March than the
Mhm.
earlier March state meet. So
Yep.
take me inside of those decisions a little bit and what you were prioritizing. And I'm also interested in like how you were training at that point. Were you continuing to train with club programs at different points to compete at these meets?
Yeah.
How's the focus,
Yeah.
at this time?
That's a very good question. It, I guess I can start with that's a very good question. There's a lot to unpack there. Throughout my high school career, I've had I believe I oh my gosh, I want to say four different coaches. All of them, and honestly, this when I look back in retrospect, so much could have gone wrong in terms of, you know, say a top level athlete, a national level athlete, being influenced by so many different coaches, so many different philosophies, so many different training regimens. I can see how that sort of sudden change year by year would have a negative impact on any athlete, really. Um, I cannot tell you how fortunate I am to sort of have the support system that I had going through high school. Parents, coaches, family members, friends even, who sort of mentored me and guided me through that sort of ebb and flow of all these different philosophies that I've given. I think a lot of the reason, or I owe a lot of the reason to why I am and where I went in the swimming or sport of swimming was because of those philosophies that I had. Um, you know, it started with Don Kimble, who basically introduced me to the competitive mentality, the competitive mindset, how to compete, how to win. You know what I mean? Saturday practices, always racing. We never did not race on Saturday. I used to hate it. I used to hate it. I used to try to get out of Saturday practice. I'm like, I'm going to lose. I hate losing. You know what I mean? But it became something that I loved doing. And that just, I mean, that was the basis that fueled everything else. You know what I mean? All of my other coaches, Troy, Cody Tozer, I mean, the list goes on and on and on. They all had their different sort of things that they installed into my career, and all of them helped me, grow essentially.
In talking to you, and we've only been going here for about 20 minutes.
Mhm.
I think you're humble and in your right to credit your coaches and your parents and the roles that they've played. But one of the things
Yeah.
that comes across in just talking to you for 20 minutes, I can feel your energy. I can feel your positivity. And
Thanks.
so, as you're talking about your ability to kind of navigate those coaches,
Uh-huh.
how do you think your personality type probably lent very well for you? You feel to me, and just a few minutes, but like
Yeah.
you feel to me like there's an energy about you, and I can imagine that. I can feel your positivity. That really played an important role in that adjustment as well. Are
Sure.
you a kind of go with the flow kind of guy that was able to adjust with to that change well?
Oh yeah, yeah, big
Yeah.
time, big time, big time. Yeah, sometimes that comes and bites me in the butt a little bit, but for the most part, I guess I could describe myself as someone who is okay with not necessarily having a plan, as long as I have a somewhat of a sight into where we're going. How we get there, I trust you. You know what I mean? If you're my coach, I trust you. If you're my teammate, I trust you. Do you know what I mean? I believe that we have each other's best interests in mind. we explain our goals to one another. We share, you know, where we want to end up, and we work like hell to get there. Do you know what I mean? And so with all of these different coaches, especially, you know, with the changes and whatnot, keeping the positive mindset, keeping the positive mentality, always, you know, sort of accepting criticism and not taking it as, you know, an offense. Oh my gosh. Yeah. It helped a ton. It helped a ton. Yeah.
I can imagine. So, you know, as we kind of advance to your junior year, I see this as just on paper, it seems like a huge breakthrough year. You can tell me as we kind of move through these years if there are setbacks that we should be talking about, but you certainly don't see them on paper. It seems like things are going very well for you through this freshman to junior improvement. In your junior year, one of the things that I'd love to talk to you about is this is kind of the first year, one, that you transition to the 200 at the high school meet, where we see you leaving the 50, and you were able to swim a 20.2 leading off your 200 free relay. So we do see you flash really well in that 50, but we get to see you at the high school state meet and at junior national level type meets going in the 200. You show that 138.1 in the 200. First time we've really seen that from you at that point. And I think at this point, because it looks to me like you're a little young for your age, right? So you're kind of transitioning through like 15 to 16 years old here in 138.1, which is really quick for a kid that, you know, is probably closer to 15, almost to 16.
Yeah.
And 43.90 in the 100. And this is a really big swim, you know, even like historically in the state, because not a lot of guys had been 43 from the state of Michigan at this point, certainly is 18 and under. So it's a really exciting year for you, obviously, you know, and I'd love to hear from your perspective what happened for you in that year that made things come together so well.
Yeah, absolutely. As you know, as you said, you know, kind of entering into that space, that mentality of you know, the pond is not just state meet now, it is on a national level. It is, you're competing against, you know, Maxime Rooney's across the world. You're competing against, you know, Tate Jackson's across the world, you know, or across the country, I should say. Stuff like that sort of broadened the amount of like the sight of how much work needed to actually be done. And so while those swims were great for me at a state level, don't get me wrong, I was proud of it, absolutely proud of it, like, ecstatic when I went at 43.9 for the first time. I mean, that was awesome. But you know, I realized in that moment that like, oh, things are just getting started. Do you know what I mean? Things are just getting started. Like the wheels are just starting to turn. And so, you know, like I said, I think one of the big things that played a role into the success that I had were the opportunities that came across the table due to the support system that I have. An example of such, you know, I was fortunate enough to be introduced or get invited on multiple occasions to go and swim and train at the Olympic Training Center. Phenomenal program, insanely difficult, you know, especially going up to Colorado altitude where there's no air whatsoever, waking up at 4 a.m, swimming till the cows come home. You know what I mean? It's extremely tiring, but it's stuff like that where it sets you up for success in the future. You know what I mean? And so this 43.9, probably one of the most fun swims that I've had in my life. You know, for me at that point in time, it was like, this is a long time coming. Like I worked for this, you know what I mean? I worked for this. And so, yeah, but again, that was just the stepping stone that was going to lead into, you know, things that I could not have even foreseen coming on a national level.
Let's pursue those camps a little bit more. I'd love to hear more about some of the kids that you were exposed to for the first time, you know, and maybe like training partners that, you know, kind of popped open your eyes a little bit.
Absolutely.
I just recently heard a story about one of the young guys telling me about going to a camp, and 2 of the female swimmers, a couple of breaststrokers, were doing 200 breaststroke times for time and swam top 10 in the world times at the camp. And they were just standing. He was just wait, what? You know, like Were there eye-popping moments for you that you can tell me about?
There were definitely moments where, yeah. So I guess I can start. The first time that I went to the or to the Olympic Training Center, it was through a diversity camp program. It was an introduction to like, hey, this is out here. There aren't many people, minorities in the sport of swimming. You just happen to be an elite minority swimmer. Please come and represent United States. Please come and represent yourself. Join this program. I did. Absolutely phenomenal. Loved the people who I was working with, and those people. I mean, while some of them, did not continue swimming, a lot of them continued to swim, and they became great. Since going to the Olympic Training Center and realizing, seeing other Olympians, not just in swimming, but track, archery, all of the sports, they were there, and you're like, oh my gosh, like I'm setting foot on grounds where Michael Phelps would walk, where Ryan Lochte would spend the night and eat food. You know what I mean? Like I am here amongst people who are great. And so that sort of like introduction and that sort of exposure blew my little mind, because I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm actually here. The people that I met there, and I will say this till the day that I die, the people that I've met through the sport of swimming is something that is probably the greatest takeaway. If I wasn't a good swimmer, if I didn't have the times that I had, if I, for whatever reason, was injured and wasn't able to compete anymore, one thing that I don't think I would ever trade for the world are the friends and sort of the camaraderie that has come from the sport of swimming. One of my really good friends, Maxime Rooney, I believe he swims for Texas. He swam for Texas. He's now actually a professional swimmer, believe it or not. He's joined his own team. I met him at the Olympic Training Center camp, and we were training partners. And I remember thinking like, oh my God, this guy is just as good as me. Like this guy is just as good as me. And it freaked out at the beginning because, of course you're an athlete, you're a competitor, you want to be the best. But since getting to know him, since, maturing obviously, and since, spending the rest of the camp with those people just like Maxime, just as talented as Maxime, you sort of like, oh, okay, I respect the sport. I respect the people who are here. We're all here to grind, and, we do what we have to do. But yeah, no, those are experiences that I wouldn't trade for the world.
So I want to dig in just a little bit more on this 4390. As I was just, as you were talking a little bit, I was looking at a couple of charts that I have that I'll show you in a second. But two things on that 4390. One, it's still the state record for 15, 16-year-old 100 freestylers. And we now have 6 years of separation with that swim. So now it's becoming, particularly at a time with the underwater kicking exploding and whatnot, we've seen, that's significant to see a record at this time stand for 6 years. And who knows, we might be looking at that record having stood over a decade in a few years and really start to realize this could be one of the really special state records. But, I think it's really cool to not just see a state record. That time is still top 20 in the history of National Age Group Top 100s. It's number 19, I think, and when I looked recently, to this day, which, to see a race that has had staying power. I totally respect you as a competitor and the way you're describing that. For you, this was a stepping stone race. But hey, let's take a step back to say that may have been a race that unlocked things in your mind. Yeah. But it's standing up. Did you realize at the time, that's really special, or has that become more apparent to you as time has gone by?
No, I mean, definitely when I hit the wall and I looked behind me and I saw 43.9 on the board, the first thing that went through my head was, oh my gosh, like that can't be right. Do you know what I mean? Like that there's like something was wrong on the board. I don't know. But then, going back to what I said before, I thought I was like, no, wait, Tabahn, like you've worked for, like, this is something that you've worked for, you know what I mean? And so when I saw that, I was like, wait a minute, that is right. People were cheering. My parents were cheering. I remember my grandparents were in the stands as well. And it was in that moment that I realized, okay, like this is something that's pretty special.